Before we get to today's episode, I want to give a quick shout out to today's sponsor, Paperly. Paperly fills the gap in your traditional SIS or LMS and can save your school time and money. So check out their website at paperly.io. Now let's get to today's show.
Oh, the classic Luke Callier.
The classic Callier.
Forgot to press record on the podcast.
You had one job to do, Matt. I'm blaming you. I'm a blame shifter.
Oh, look, I was put off because we're using Zoom today.
Oh dear. Well, that was a malfunction. I reckon we're a good 10 minutes in this time. It might be the furthest we've ever got into a podcast, Matt.
Yeah, I think it might have been.
When I might have dropped the F-bomb there.
We'll make sure that doesn't make the cut.
All right. Sorry, Matt. We'll have to go back. We rewind.
Rewind.
Welcome to Edleaders, the podcast covering all the interesting ideas about leadership, strategy, culture, and the business of K-12 education. I'm your host, Luke Callier, and joining me each week in the chair is my co-host and colleague, Matthew Irving, who's lost it. He has lost it. Today, Matt, we are going back to our starting roots. We are going back to just a conversation with you and me.
Time just to chat, time to riff, and time to explore and reflect on what the year has been.
Absolutely. So with that, let's get into it. Not that we haven't done this already, but let's get into it again for the second time. Callier, good job, mate.
Good job.
I'm out of practice. That's it.
Well, you're in holiday mode. You're in holiday mode. I get it.
I'm in holiday mode. That's right. And today we're recording on the 30th of December, 22. So we are going to do a little bit of a review of 2022, and hopefully I'm going to publish this today. So that's my challenge. So with that, let's get into it, Matt. So we're going to start with our highlights, 2 highlights, if you've got 2, for Edleaders in 2022.
Well, I think the 2 biggest highlights for me is just the number of listens we've had on the pod. We've reached 25,000 listens, and for me, that's a great milestone, but a great reflection that what we're doing is making a difference, and people are wanting to listen, which is always the challenge with a podcast. I think the other real reflection for me and highlight is just being able to enter and speak into different conferences in Canberra, into Melbourne, into Brisbane, into Perth, and meet our Edleaders fans. And so many times we've sort of been at these conferences and people have come up to us and, don't you know who we are? I'm like, no, I don't know who you are. But they feel like they know us because they've listened to the pod. And for me, that's been just a wonderful experience of connecting with like-minded educators, sharing the love and connecting. For me, that's been a great highlight for 2022.
Yeah, I, as Matt, I often will send you a little snippet when we go past a little milestone, and it's certainly been pretty rewarding to see that growth curve as we've gone up. The hockey stick kind of off to the right around, downloads, listens, growth in terms of the reach of the podcast, and I get a real kick out of it every time I send you that little message with a big red circle around it, and so that's been a lot of fun to see that grow. I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were describing that relationship that listeners have with a podcast host or a live streamer as a parasocial relationship, which I thought was an interesting terminology. But it's kind of, I find it really cool when people kind of come up to you and, or, you meet people that as you're kind of having phone calls with people or doing different things in the normal day-to-day life or day-to-day work. And they go, oh yeah, cool. I listened to the podcast. And I was like, oh, excellent. And it kind of catches me by surprise every time. I remember being at an event and I was getting a coffee or something like that. And someone said, oh, I recognize that voice. You're the guy from the podcast, aren't you? I was like, yes. Hopefully you like it. But, as you say, I think getting out and kind of meeting the community of people that listen, the community of people that want to engage in kind of like the authentic conversations, that have their favorite episodes. It's a real thrill to kind of meet people who are kind of enjoying the concept of what we're trying to bring to life around authentic conversations and authentic connection. And it's been a real buzz when that happens.
Absolutely. And what are the other highlights for you this year?
So for me, I had two down. One was the live podcast that we did in Melbourne and here in Perth. Just the nature of going from, when we record these, usually very early in the morning, our time here in Perth, where it's just you, me, and a computer screen and a guest, to being kind of connected with, some of the community that already know us, but also, brand new people, and taking it to the stage. It's just brings a different energy and a different emotion and different nerves. Like I found, you walk up on stage and all of a sudden you've got, the mic strapped on, and it's very different to kind of pressing record when you remember on a computer screen, and it's just a few of you. So it's been a real thrill to be up there on stage.
And something that not everyone does. I think that's been quite a unique thing for us to do, and also to feed off that energy that you get from a crowd rather than just an individual that we're interviewing. I found that fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm looking forward to bringing one of them. I think we've got the recording of a couple of them, but definitely we'll bring the recording of the last one, and hopefully the listeners will get a bit of a sense of how that played out on the day.
Yep, can't wait.
And the other highlight for me, Matt, was our mastermind roundtable that we hosted in Melbourne. Obviously, off the back of being in Melbourne for the Schoolbox meetup, hosting an event in Melbourne, over 50 people showed up to share in the morning breakfast that we had, and just kind of that nature of bringing together, those people in education that are valuing what we do, but also the authentic connection in real time and in person. For me, that was a real thrill. How did you find that morning?
I found it fascinating because we were just facilitators on the day, and people found their people and connected, and for me spoke very strongly to who we are and what we're about in terms of our mission and purpose, and that is to be in community with others, to connect with one another. And I thought that was a great expression of that. Though, Luke, there were some challenges in organizing that.
Yeah, it probably took a little bit more of my time than I anticipated, but I guess in my head I was like, you just bang together an event page, people will turn up. But yeah, it was probably a few more hours went into that than originally anticipated, but the outcome for me was definitely worthwhile, and giving people that opportunity to engage in a space and a time for authentic conversations. So often we're running around as educators, going to a conference here and there, having a quick 5-minute conversation over a coffee, but not really having time to go deep and understand the people around the table and in a facilitated way. And I thought that was, really worthwhile.
And I think from that experience too is the importance of just sharing the day-to-day obstacles and challenges people face, that we're not alone and we can share that burden, but also it was a great opportunity to inspire one another. We hope that was, impactful, and that new relationships were formed, and that they've continued since.
Yeah, absolutely. So with that, we'll move on to the second part, second question. Your highlights from your day-to-day normal role.
Highlights from my day-to-day role. Well,
do you want me to go first?
Why don't you go first?
While you're thinking about it.
Well,
so you're obviously well prepared.
I am. No, actually, no. I'll go because I'm well prepared in my mind at this very moment as I reflect on that question. Thank you, Luke. Probably the big highlight for me was probably two things. One, the fact that I got two rather large infrastructure projects to development application stage before Christmas. That was
big. They're big.
They're big. They're multi-million-dollar projects.
Tens of $1 million projects.
Okay. Okay, so they're a bit big, but been on a 2-year journey, and to have that next part of the process done before Christmas was a real, it's been worth it. And I think the other thing for me throughout 2022, and not necessarily a single highlight, but is that notion of holding things lightly. That I don't need to, hold everything so tightly and sort of manage and then micromanage and sort of, direct traffic, if you like, because I can be a bit of the traffic warden when it comes to strategic projects, but to let other people enter into the space. And to really understand what the notion of co-design means and co-creating means, rather than the Matt Irving show, which is often to direct things, hold things tightly, and sometimes the outcome's not that great. So not necessarily a single highlight, but more of a modality, a way of practicing my leadership. So that'd be the two things I would highlight.
Yeah, I think I saw that in you across the year, or the first 9 months of the year anyway. But that challenge of always knowing the outcome or the answer that you want from a co-design, and sometimes, in our relationship, I think we have often co-designed and come out with the 2 + 2 = 5, but that's been a very developed over a long period. But sometimes that's a challenge in other situations.
Absolutely. Sometimes you do have to direct the traffic, and know what that outcome is and know how to get there. But one of the things I've really reflected on is sometimes you can be really surprised. You may not be the outcome that you were seeking, but you know what? It's probably a better outcome. And so that's been a real thrill this year. And people shine, people step up, and we've got extraordinary people in our schools, absolutely extraordinary people, who have so much to give. If only we provided some space for them. So, to see people grow into those spaces as part of a co-design of a project, again, it has been quite rewarding.
And obviously the 2 big buildings, not certainly not without its challenges over the last couple of years. But is there any one thing that stood out this year in terms of a conversation or a milestone with those buildings or those designs?
Well, it's been very challenging, because you're working with so many stakeholders. Um, but I think the one thing, and it was interesting, I had lunch with our architects just before Christmas, just to kind of reflect on the year.
I
And
hope they were paying.
they did pay for a very nice lunch, and so they should. But one of the things that they said to us with all the schools that they work with and organizations, they have not seen a school who developed such a well-crafted design brief, a school that really knows what it wants to do and articulates it so well. So they said that's the first thing, but the second thing also is the way that we hold the fidelity of that particular design, that we don't let the architect stray too far from it. And it's something that I've deliberately done.
It's very
But
challenging with architects.
absolutely, because they, shiny things, and what if we do this, and we'll just create this, beautiful mural here, and this design is just very funky, and so I'm like, well, it's not functional, and it doesn't meet the design brief. But for the architects to articulate that at that lunch demonstrated me the importance of holding the line. I've always kind of, from I guess from a frameworks perspective, had it in my mind and have really held the line on things. But for an architect to say, we noticed that we value that, and we wish more schools were like that, was just a great confirmation of how important it is for a school to really be clear about what they want. What does it look like for students every day? What does it look like for teachers every day? It was that was an absolute thrill.
Well, I think it goes to your point there around the design brief and the amount of time, energy, effort, consultation that kind of went into that or goes into that. And the more time and energy and effort that goes into that in the front end, leads to that result. But on the back end, buildings that are, for the most part, well thought out. And then as a school, you're the ones that are left to live with it. You're the ones that are going to teach in it. You're the ones that are going to use it on a day-to-day basis. Architect comes in, designs flashy thing, posts it for awards, gets awards, moves on to next building. They don't actually live and use and breathe the building for the next 20, 30, 50 years.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think articulating what the architect's role is, the architect's role is to take your design brief and to take our insights and our research and our stakeholder engagement. And that's probably 60% of it. And 40% of it is for them to solve the problem. They are given a design brief. They need to meet that design brief, but their job is to solve problems. It's not our job to solve the problems. And I think the back end of that too, which is also reflected in this lunch that we had, was, and I've just met a new director of finance and kind of onboarding them, but this idea of developing an implementation project. So once you've got the design, you're starting to dig the dirt, you've dug that first hole. Well, you've got to move very quickly into developing an implementation plan with your stakeholders. Because how many times have we seen a new build and it's all very flashy, and you throw teachers and students in there expecting them to kind of use the space, and they just end up using the space in the way that they've always used spaces. They set up their rows of desks, etc. And you're like, well, that's not the purpose of this building or the design of this building. So being able to pivot in 2023, my job is to really move towards that implementation plan, bring the stakeholders back together and say, all right, what are the protocols and practices here? What are our agreements with the way we use this building? And how are we going to make sure that everything we dreamt of in our design brief becomes a reality?
Yeah, and just to go back to one thing you said there, which I think differentiates good architects and the more average architects, that the good architects solve the problems. They don't just put lines on a piece of paper that look funky. They solve the problems that you're trying to solve. They don't, yeah. So, and I think that's an important point for, architects to remember.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's just about having a really strong relationship and an honest one. So yeah, no, I think they're my I guess my reflections from my role. But intrigued, you've been in a couple of roles this year. What have been your highlights?
Well, I kind of have to say one of the highlights is the new job. New job, new school, new team. Taking that step up to the executive leadership team at St Hilda's. Been really an exciting journey and rewarding journey. I feel already very valued as part of that team. And so that's been a real highlight for me. And sometimes, you and I have talked about that notion of imposter syndrome and, capability or feeling worthy. But yeah, it's been a really interesting journey for myself to kind of go to that next level or take that step up and feel comfortable and feel like what you're bringing to the table is valued and listened to.
And just talk to me about that concept of value. You talked about feeling valued. I wonder what that looks like in practice. What have you noticed about the leaders around you that have, where you've got that sense of value and that you've got something to bring to the table?
In my head, I guess two things pop to mind straight away, and that is like, when you're asked for advice or suggestions, or even when you're not asked and you give advice or suggestions. And I always, say you can take this with a grain of salt. I don't expect, having been here, the new kid on the block, that this is necessarily going to be taken. But, 80, 90% of the time, that's listened to or taken on board or changed with your suggestions, is really, really, it's a nice feeling when that happens. And then also just the feedback around, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're here, and I know that we're going to do some great things together. I'm so glad that you're a part of this, or that you're on this journey with us. So those are the kind of things that pop to mind.
And that's really interesting, that last piece from a leader. Like, that costs you nothing. but means the world. I'm so glad you're here. That for me, that just isn't that just a wonderful a wonderful confirmation that you've made the right choice and that you're in the right place at the right time, and you're there to make a difference. You're not there to make up the numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's not that I didn't feel that at Wesley or in working with you, but it just in a different way and a different level. So, and then probably the second highlight for me was really seeing the people that I was working with at Wesley flourish, and leaving them in positions of they have the opportunity to really flourish and do well with the next part of their journey in their career. And that was, super rewarding to see that. I felt like I'd kind of tried to be planning that, for the last kind of year or 18 months. I didn't know that I was going to be, leaving this year. It wasn't really on the agenda, but it was really rewarding to see those people flourish.
Yeah, wonderful.
All right, moving on, Matt, to two highlights for your own personal life.
Okay. Highlights for my personal life. Well, one would be, and we probably sort of spoke about this right at the beginning of the year, when I might have been absent from a particular podcast. And that is just the road of recovery after a car accident. It's been a long journey, but I've come such a long way. And I actually feel better this time of year than I've been all year. And so for me, just that personal journey of recovery in my personal life, it hasn't been without its challenges, but I can sit here now and just go, wow, I feel so much better. So that would be a real highlight for me, even though it probably doesn't sound too good, too flash.
Well, it's been a long journey. It was a
Oh,
lot, and a lot of setbacks along the way. You've been a couple of stints in hospital, but we caught up, I don't know, 2 weeks ago, just before Christmas. And I said it to you at the time, it's the best I've seen you all year, I think.
yeah. Yeah. And it's just, at the time, you don't imagine that you're actually going to be, healed, if you like, or fully recovered. But I feel great. And so, watch out 2023. I think
Look out.
Matt's dangerous. And as one of my previous colleagues said, Tigger's got his bounce back. So watch out.
Look out.
And probably the other thing for me personally, is the journey that I've taken, we've taken as a family, and to get to the end of the year in one piece, with our children and the ups and downs of different medical things across the year, to get to the end of the year in one piece. You know what? I'm quite joyous about it. I'm quite thankful. And this summer break is a great time to rest and refresh and renew as a family. But certainly it's been, to get to the end of the year, there was many times where my wife and I didn't think we would get to the end of the year with our family in one piece. And so to get there, in a moment of reflection, I'm just so thankful. Just so thankful.
And just for the audience, Matt, not to go into any details, but just to give the audience a sense of your family and their ages, so that they understand, a bit about you.
So I have 3 children, and we have 2 daughters, 14 and 13. So one's just finished year 9, one finished year 7, and I have a son who's 9, so he's in year 3. So those people that have teenagers will know better than anything what that time looks like. But we've had a few, medical things across the year, particularly with the girls, that's required a significant amount of intervention from a range of medical professionals, and that continues on a weekly basis. So yeah, that just gives just a bit of a snapshot of what life looks like.
Yeah, certainly. Sam and I talk sometimes. I'll get to my family in a second, but so the 3 and a 5-year-old, I was just at a family event a couple of days ago, and they've got she might be year 8 going into year 9, I think. And she was on the phone and she had this surly look going on. And I was like, Sam, I don't ever want our kids to be teenagers. Can we can we keep a phone out of their hands until they're like 17? Like it was just, just get that reflection and that reminder of all that to look forward to.
Absolutely. Good luck with the phone till they're 17. I wish you all the best. But you can expect some sass. It'll come. It'll come.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah. For me, Matt, I had 2 down. The first was, the stuff that I achieved with, like my little side hobby of running an ultra marathon, 65 Ks in Avon Valley.
Nuts. Absolutely nuts.
It took 12 hours, so it wasn't the quickest of runs, but 2,700 meters of vertical, a big day and big event. And I thank my mum and Sam for coming out and supporting me at the checkpoints along the way. But that was very cool, as was running the Melbourne Marathon in October. Running out onto the MCG with one of my good buddies across the last 35 years was pretty cool.
That's some pretty big achievements. And despite me giving you absolute grief, because I do think you're a little bit nuts, what a wonderful thing to look back on and go, you've achieved some pretty significant milestones there.
Yeah, absolutely. I, when I first ran my first marathon 2 or 3 years ago, I thought it was going to be a one and done. So to get bitten by the bug a little bit and to kind of get into it, it's been a fun journey. And watch this space, because I've signed up for an 80K ultra down in Margaret River in May.
I know.
So
I'm not going to be at the finish line to pick you up. Let me tell you.
Why not? Come on. Just pop down for the weekend. It's only a 3.5 hour drive. You'll see me cross the finish line looking like a 90-year-old man.
I'll have the stretcher ready.
Like this?
Yep. You can borrow my walking stick.
I like it. And the second highlight for me was, obviously family related, but watching the kids kind of grow and learn. Harvey across the year learning to read was pretty cool. Bringing home his reader and getting pretty excited when he can kind of read through a book with a couple of sentences on each page was pretty cool. Watching him learn to swim by himself across the year, no assistance and no floaties, and just recently taking off the training wheels on the bike, and he was off, and that was a pretty cool moment watching him take off for the first time on his bike. And with Olivia, Biddy as we call her, going to big school for the first time in pre-kindy, like not even a tear, Matt, not even a tear, just straight in, getting involved.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, and just in the last month or two, being able to almost write her own name, which has been pretty cool to see.
Some great highlights there. Fantastic.
Yeah. Now, I've got low lights.
Have
you got any low lights you'd like to share, Matt, for the year?
Well, I think we've alluded to a few things already from a personal perspective. Look, I probably have quite a broad one, and I think 2022 has been a really hard year for a lot of people. And I reflect on my colleagues, I reflect on our school, and it's been a real sense of hardship in many cases. And we talk about here at Edleaders, what's in your backpack, and so many people have had personal and professional things that they've loaded up in that backpack and have been holding things quite heavily as they've gone about their business. And 2022 has been a year of not being able to delineate between your personal and professional life. There's been a real sense of crossover and a blurring of the lines, if you like. And that's been a great challenge for people. And the more people I meet, the more people I speak to in other places, not just my own colleagues, there's been a real sense of that in 2022, coming out of COVID. There's been a real, recalibration, if you like, of what's important. but yeah, certainly there's been a lot of hardship out there, and that's something that for me as a leader, needing to be conscious of. How do we support those people in a pastoral sense? But yeah, how do you manage the lowlights in people's lives, and how do you help them to hold both their professional and personal lives together? So, that'd be just a kind of a really broad reflection. On a personal note, probably haven't achieved everything I set out to achieve because of my accident and my family. I had great dreams of a new learning and teaching framework, and I had great dreams of a refined leadership framework of development. And, I had some big strategic pieces that I wanted to deliver, but they were just put on the back burner. So for me, those things disappoint me, but I'm not disheartened. And so I know that 2023 is a new year, and I can get back on the horse, if that's a way of saying it, to deliver those things. So that would be my reflection around lowlights. But for someone who's so optimistic about life and so happy, Luke, what might be your lowlights?
Yeah, I'll get to them. I just want to talk about that backpack notion for a second. It's something that we have talked about a lot, in our own conversations around that challenge of, as a leader, never knowing what's in someone else's backpack until they show you. And that's really hard sometimes because of whatever reason. Say like I'm in a new school in a new context, I don't have 5, 6, 8 years of relationship to fall back on to understand about what's in their backpack, or for them to feel comfortable sharing what's in their backpack. And some people will do that quicker than others. But that notion of, to be a truly great leader, sometimes I think you need to understand that backpack for all of those people around you. And it's not until you really understand what they're carrying that you can truly be in relationship with them in a way, and get the best out of that relationship for both of you. For both of you in a personal sense, in terms of satisfaction for coming to work every day, but also in a sense of getting the best out of them for from their work that they do, and what they're bringing to the table.
And I think, when you are developing new relationships, and you are looking at your people and trying to understand their backpack, there's three notions that I sort of fall back on. And that is, what do you notice? What do you notice about someone's physical, presentation? What do you notice about their engagement? What do you notice about their demeanor, and etc.? So noticing is something that's really important. And then inquiring. Inquire, how are you traveling today? What's on your mind? Not how are you? Are you well? Let's move beyond that to some more deliberate questions that help you surface what's in someone's backpack without being invasive. And then,
it's too easy to say, how are you? Yeah, I'm good, thanks.
Yeah,
that doesn't tell anyone anything.
No.
I like the question of, tell me how you're going on a level of 1 to 10.
Yeah. Because I think if we are to be truly human, we need to be in relationship with one another. We need to be connected. And so we need to find ways of building meaningful connections. And yes, how are you when you're off to a meeting, and just general niceties and pleasantries, it has its place, absolutely, in building community. But if we want to go deeper, we have to ask deeper questions. And so I think that's really, really important. And then depending on what you notice and how you inquire, and the data that comes from that, or the insights that come from that, well, what's the plan? As a leader, as a manager, you have a responsibility to support people. It's also your responsibility. If you hear something, you need to act. And so you can't just listen to that and just take that on board and carry that as a monkey on your back. What are you actually going to do about it? So notice, inquire, plan is a bit of a framework I heard earlier in the year, and I think it's if I think about my own practice and building those connections, the things that I've fallen back on.
Yeah, nice. So going back to me for a second.
Yeah, let's go back to you. You segued into this whole other space.
Yeah, I did.
Come on.
Good. Yes, you're right. I am a pretty optimistic and person, and like to see the joy in life. So for me, I had not working with you every day
Oh,
as a low
really?
light. Yeah.
Oh, I thought that'd be a highlight.
Well, no, I miss being able to not just wander into your office at any
Oh,
time of
yeah,
the
yeah.
day and go, Matt, I had this idea. I had this great idea last night. What do you think about X, Y, Z? Well, Matt, I was thinking about Matt. Have you got 5 minutes?
Well, let's just say Matt's never had 5 minutes and never has time for an idea, but doesn't stop Luke from just, coming to the door, closing the door, and away he goes.
That's true. It never stopped me.
Not,
More often than not, you would say, "Yeah, of course, I've got 5 minutes." When you didn't, but you'd entertain me anyway.
and then 45 minutes later, you leave.
But that's not my fault that you keep talking.
Well, as a good leader, I'm practicing my reflective listening skills, making you feel valued, Luke.
Yes, all right. So yeah, no, that is a low light. For me, obviously you don't often I think in my career there's very few times where you get to work with someone that you truly enjoy working with every day on a day-to-day basis. And so moving on from that has been a challenge and hard and in some ways sad and a bit of a low light. Obviously I've got different challenges and different people to work with and different people to have those conversations with, but that's been a bit of a low light for me.
I don't know how to respond to that, but
Yeah, no need.
I'll just leave it there, and
Yeah.
the sadness is mutual.
Yeah. All right. With that, we'll move on to something more exciting. Matt, your 3 favorite episodes of Edleaders throughout the year and why?
2022, we've had some great episodes. Probably the 3 that stick out for me. I really loved our conversations with Rob French, who's a new principal in 2022, and he was generous enough to give us some time before, he's sitting in the chair for his first week and then the first 100 days. And, reflecting on that particular episode, it was a really interesting insight in how to listen and learn your way into an organization when you're new and when you're the leader. I thought he articulated that very well. I loved his humility. He was such a humble guy, and he leads with heart, and so that was just beautiful for him to share that. And the other thing that really stood out to me was his ability to pause on decision making. In schools, in leadership, we know that some of us are making hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of decisions every day, but Rob has this notion of just stopping and going, you know what, I'm going to get back to you. I just need some time. And to go into his office to reflect on an important decision and then make the call, and not feeling like he has to make every decision on the run, as often we find ourselves. So Rob French. The other one was our Peter Hutton arc. That was a fantastic, insightful conversation with Peter. For me, two parts that came out was his real passion for equity in education in this country. How do we break down our system to create equity across both public and private education? What a great challenge to all of us to reflect on and to think about how we do that. And the other one was a real interesting quote around leadership: rise as far as you can, as fast as you can. This notion that we need to serve, long-term apprenticeships, etc. He just said it's absolutely perfect, just go for it. And so I took a lot of heart from that and was really encouraged by that. And then my third episode was Nisha Flint in Geraldton, leading Geraldton Grammar. What a powerhouse is Nisha. And what does it actually mean to lead a community, not a school, but lead in a community more broadly? And she shared some pretty interesting insights, particularly around tragedy and how you act as a pastoral leader. How do you roll up your sleeves and you're in the midst of it, and you're sitting with a family who's explaining, that their father has passed away, and it was an interesting reality check about just the complexities and the hardship that principals face, but how you can lead through that successfully. So for me, Rob, Nisha, and Peter were some interviews that we did that I drew a lot of inspiration from.
Well, what's funny about that, Matt, is that I drew up my list independent to you. We haven't shared what was on these lists. And I had the Rob French episodes, Peter Hutton, and Nisha Flynn.
No way.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
Yeah. So, but I had some special mentions, but as well to alongside those three. But I couldn't have said it better. The three that you picked out, Rob, obviously, giving up his time to share his journey, and be vulnerable in going through that journey with an audience of people that he doesn't know, and sharing that journey so that others that are going on that journey can have an understanding of what maybe to expect or what they can learn from his journey. I thought was, and as you said, the humility, leading with his heart, you just get that sense that he's just a nice guy, and all kudos to him for sharing that with us. And I thought that was just exceptional interview, really, series. And I'm looking forward to getting back on with him next week or the week after, and just closing out that arc, a year on from sitting in the chair for the first time, and how he's going. Peter Hutton, obviously, it was a pretty big moment for us to have a guy like Peter agree to kind of come on the show. There's Peter, obviously very well known in education, has a lot of is well known through the future schools and what he created at Templestowe, and kind of listening firsthand to that journey, but then also going into his goals for the future and what he'd like to achieve with the types of schools that he'd like to create. It was super fascinating. And as we've been on our own journey in that space, just, I guess, fascinating to understand what really motivates someone like him. And as you said, it's really about equity, and finding equitable ways to ensure that kids are being able to learn in meaningful and authentic and engaging ways. And Nisha, of course, just that sheer authenticity, and I love that about her when I worked with her at PLC, when she was in the head of senior school role there. But it really shone through that she just tells it how it is. There's no sugarcoating with her, really. And that notion of just, it's okay to be authentic to who you are as a leader. You don't have to get into a role and change the type of person that you're going to be. And that's okay. So go on.
No, absolutely. And I just think, if you reflect on those three interviewees, that they have their own authenticity. They know who they are. They speak truth. And I think that there's a really interesting connection between all three of them.
Absolutely. Now I've got a couple of special mentions, Matt, as well.
Oh,
it's like having children having episodes. You can't just, it's hard to pick just a few.
Go for it.
So I had a special mention. I obviously have to mention Fiona Johnston. A year ago, sitting in her office recording an episode of the podcast. Never would have thought that 10 months later I'd be working for her. And I remember thinking at the time just how much of a vision she had for the type of education that she wanted to deliver, and the type of strategic thinking and so forth that she was doing. So shout out to her, of course, being my new boss.
Tick.
And a couple of episodes that surprised me, I guess, were the episode about entrepreneurship and education with Baden, really early on in the year. Just a super interesting and engaging conversation, and just that notion of he really knew his stuff. Duncan from Ed Rollo.
Yeah, yep. Yeah,
just a
totally.
cracker, just
Yeah,
an A grade, A plus grade player. You can
absolutely.
see why he's being super successful in what he's doing. Super laser focused on, you know, doing what they're doing with Ed Rolo, and sticking to that kind of roadmap. And you can see why, VCs have invested a lot in that company. And it's doing amazing, great things with the number of schools that it's servicing and whatnot. And the other one that kind of surprised me a little bit was Troy.
Yeah.
From a middle school perspective, how much he had to add to the narrative and the conversation and uniqueness of that role in a middle school context, and how it's not without its challenges, uh, you know, being in that environment. So a couple of special mentions there.
And more broadly, we've loved every interview that we've done. We've gathered so many professional insights, and we've said it before here on the pod: best professional learning we do week in, week out. And so great, a shout out to all our interviewees. It's been a wonderful, wonderful year.
Absolutely agree. It's, as I say, it's kind of like picking your favorite children, but special shout out to all those guests who have given up their time to join us and share their knowledge and wisdom. So with that, Matt, we also love a good to learn list. We've talked about this, might have been on episode 5 or 6 maybe, but to learns in 2023. Have you got a couple of things that you'd like to learn about?
So this has been on my radar for a couple of years, and I know Luke and you and I have talked about this, but on my to learn list is, how do you truly diversify the business model that exists in our schools? When we know that we have a fixed income, we have a fixed business model, how do we diversify so that we can safeguard our education institutions and our schools for the future? As the economy continues to be disrupted, as there's disruption and innovation and technology and social disruption, how do we safeguard our schools? So I really love to delve a little bit more deeply into our business models. I'd love to delve a little bit more deeply into, how do we move away from a fixed income model, and beyond salaries. We know that salaries make up so much of our expenditure in schools. How do we start shifting the dial? And I think diversification is probably the key. So for me, I really want to be committed to that for 2023, and see where that leads us. The other thing that I think is on my to learn list, and really Nisha inspired this, is, what does pastoral and community leadership look like in a training context? We've spoken a lot on the pod about, do you do an MBA? Do you do a Masters of Leadership? What does the training look like? But my question is, what does pastoral training look like? How do you be the social worker, the chaplain, the psychologist, the support function when tragedy hits and when there are great challenges for people in their personal lives? I don't see where the training is for pastoral community leadership. And so on my to learn list is to reflect on that, to find out more about where that potentially might be happening in leadership development courses across the country and internationally, and then potentially, formulate something for leaders going forward. So they'd be the two big tickets on my list to learn list for 2023. How about you?
Yeah, I'll get to me in a second, but I just do want to mention,
I knew.
I got to dive into something here. Diversification. I mean, you and I have talked a lot about that over the last couple of years, but I think it's been interesting this year watching Haileybury from afar in terms of what they've launched with their online platform. Probably, I would guess, without doing the research, probably the most expensive online school environment in Australia. Certainly a premium cost, and probably you'd have to say that Haileybury are, the way it's run with a CEO, are one of the better schools at diversifying with different types of campuses, different locations, different states, online, hybrid, in person. They seem to be the leaders to me in that diversification. But I think the challenge with diversification becomes, how do you remain niche, or how do you remain not all things to all people? And I think in schools, sometimes we have this, especially in the schools that we tend to work in, how do we try and be all things to all people? Well, we want to be good at sport. We want to be good at the arts. We want to be able to do this. We want to be able to do that. We want to be, able to do it all. But when you service all of those needs, generally it often means that you can't do everything well, or that you're going to let some people down. And I think that notion of diversification, the challenge of that comes with, how do we diversify in niche areas so that we can be one thing to one group of people and do that really well, and then do this other thing over here, which is maybe a different service, but do that really well too.
And so that strategy notion of what we say yes to is equally as important as what we say no to ensure that we get that quality, that we're delivering a quality product. Yeah, absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
And I completely agree on the pastoral and community leadership. The only thing that I've really seen in that space is kind of probably like the mental first aid course, or the mental wellbeing first aid course. But yeah, it's an interesting space, and not everyone talks about, improving your teaching and learning skills or improving your classroom skills. But there's not a lot of work that necessarily goes into improving that notion of how you're talking or having relationships with children or students.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting space to reflect on at both a teacher level but a leader level. Yeah, fascinating. So are you ready?
I'm ready now.
Okay, go.
All right. So for me, I love tech. I put a post up about this last week, but ChatGPT 3 in the last few weeks, an AI service that's kind of like this, ask it anything, and it gives you a very, very in-depth response. Don't know if you've had a chance to play this, but that notion of what is AI going to be in education? How can it be a force for good? And it, having played with the tool, the fundamental difference of this one in particular, ChatGPT, is that it's free for anyone to use. And I've tried it in a few different circumstances in the last few weeks, and it has so much capability and ability to be of assistance and of help in education, but it will also fundamentally shift and change the way potentially we think about assessing essays and whatnot in education. So it has this really good ability to be a force for good in many ways, and I'd love to explore that and go deep on how that can play out, and to focus on the good. Obviously there's going to be some drawbacks as well, but that's something I definitely want to learn more about, and possibly be a leader in understanding that.
That's really interesting. Just before Christmas, I wrote an article just about this, around AI, and in the context of how does it change the identity of teachers? We see teachers as instructors, teachers as experts. Well, this type of technology is going to shift the notion of identity to teacher as facilitator, teacher as mentor, and we'll see a rise in personalized learning, because AI will be providing the instruction and a lot of that expert knowledge when it comes to, essay writing and collaboration and the like. The second notion that I wrote about was exactly what you've just described, is assessment. Will kids be writing essays, in 2 or 3 years' time, when we have predictive text technologies and the type of technology you're sort of describing? What does writing skills look like? What does research skills look like? And so from that assessment perspective, it's really going to change it up. So I'm really pleased that you're doing that research, because, I can see it's happening now, but in the next, let's say we fast forward 5 years, this will just be normal. So teacher identity changing, and our approach to assessment changing.
Yeah, as you started talking there, I wrote down facilitator, and then you talked about it. But yeah, I definitely think that it continues to evolve and change that notion, particularly as you move up, through senior school context. That notion of, well, I don't have to be the font of all knowledge, and not that teachers necessarily think that, but to facilitating the right question to ask. And I think that also lends itself to that notion of how is humans going to get the best of AI? And I think it moves us from this notion of maybe the industrial era when we were doers, like we'd build things and do things. We've kind of moved into this knowledge era of creating knowledge, over the last maybe 2 or 3 decades. And I think that this notion of AI is changing us from creator of knowledge to narrator. It's almost like we've got to narrate the right question to get the right answer or the very best answer. And the human skill will really be around how do we ask the very best question to AI to elicit the very best answer. And there'll be a real skill in understanding that. I don't think it's actually going to replace the need for marketing or media people or journalists or anything like that. The human skill is going to be nuancing the question that you're asking and then nuancing the response that it gives you to give that layer of context that humans require.
Yeah, and for me, what you speak about is just the importance of critical thinking, the importance of curiosity, and the importance of creativity. They are precursors to asking the right question. And I think overlaid with that is an ethical piece, and I think, how do we ask the right questions, ethical questions, analytical questions that seek synthesis when that's what we're chasing. So learners understanding what they need, and then how might they ask those questions or interact with AI to meet the outcomes that they seek. So yeah, I think that's really interesting space. And as I said, I can't wait to see what you learn from that, because I'll certainly be borrowing from it.
Yeah, just to riff off that idea of the critical thinking, imagine a year 9 or 10 Hassel English class where instead of the assessment being write an 800-word essay on X, maybe in 3 years' time, the assessment might be generate 10 different AI responses to this question or this topic, and then critically analyze each of the essays. And that's the difference, isn't it? That's a different skill.
There's a full circle there, in terms of doing the front end bit and writing piece and asking the right questions to analyzing and assessing the result. So that feedback loop is absolutely direct from input to output.
Absolutely. All right, predictions for 23. Have you got any Nostradamus style predictions for next year, Matt?
Predictions. Well, I think there's a lot of movement across the country to exploring a learner profile and a digital wallet that will be that validation tool for what comes next after schooling. So I firmly believe that ATAR continues to diminish. Here in Western Australia, only 36% of students finished an ATAR pathway in 2022. That's down from sort of 40% the previous year. So that continues to decline. But a learner profile that articulates marks and grades and strengths and interest areas and capabilities like what we've just been describing in critical thinking, community service, so that active global citizenship piece will come together in some form of digital wallet that's a national standard, that's transferable. So I think a lot of progress in 2023 will be made towards that. I can also see more people playing in the leadership space. So we'll see organizations, both public and private sort of schooling systems moving much more in the leadership development space, but we'll also see recruitment firms move into the leadership space to provide a full suite of development, but also recruitment at the back end. So I can see more people playing in the leadership development space. So that would be the kind of the two pieces that I see in 2023 we'll start to see evolve. And as I said, I think both of those concepts are national based. I don't think they're just sort of confined to a particular jurisdiction. I think we'll see that across across all systems. And it would be my hope, my idealistic hope, that our jurisdictions could get together and make some of those changes. So, watch those two spaces, I reckon.
I like it. Some nice hot takes there, Matt. I think just to add to your notion around the ATAR, I do think that probably in a year's time, maybe two, but by this time next year, the league rankings, the tables that get generated, I think they'll become more and more redundant. We'll see more and more schools decide that they're not going to publish it or that they're not celebrating it. And you and I talked a little bit about this, but I do think that if schools and leaders, and this is probably a good challenge to leaders out there, that if we're all on this bandwagon to say ATAR's past its use by date, and that we don't believe ATAR is a good necessarily a good judgment on an individual and their ability to succeed at university, or it's not of good value to actually judge how good a school is, which most people in schools would tell you it's not, then why are we all celebrating it?
Particularly at a school level, when we celebrate the median ATAR, we are celebrating the middle kid, and somehow that's a reflection on a school's academic prowess, or a school's measure of success. It does not make sense. We're actually celebrating the middle kid. Now, I don't have a problem in celebrating individual achievement.
Absolutely agree.
And
got to celebrate that in any form, whether
in
that's
any form.
art, sports, music, academically, celebrate it.
But who came up with this notion that a median ATAR would be a reflection of academic success? We'd put it in a rank and say that school's successful because the middle kid got this.
And just to add to that, I know that we talked about this, but in a WA context, 24,000 students did year 12. If you had a ATAR ranking of 90 as a median, that means, and you've got 100 kids in your cohort, that means that you're celebrating the 50th kid in your cohort achieving a ranking of about, what was that? I think there were 9,000 kids that did ATAR. So it was about the fact that they came 22,400th in the state. My maths was a little bit off there, I think, but you get the picture that you're celebrating the 50th kid in your cohort coming 2,400th in the state on a ranking system of 1 to 24,000, when only 9 or 10,000 kids did ATAR.
It doesn't make any sense at all. And for schools that are chasing that and where they sit, I think there's an interesting marketing piece to say, well, somehow in the court of public opinion, that's really important. But in the court of public opinion, if you wrote down the 50th kid and 2,400th in the state, how would that go in the court of public opinion?
What does it mean? It doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything. But to that kid who got that 90, well, that's a great success story for that individual kid.
Absolutely.
So why don't we put their name to it and say, hey, congratulations, Bob, for that wonderful achievement, for your effort, for your resilience, for your perseverance, for the strengths that you've shown in particular subjects. Thank you for your community service. Thank you for your commitment to our sporting teams, our music ensembles. Let's celebrate the whole package. We could riff on this for a while.
Yeah, but I think you're right. I think that the ATAR is moving towards a learner profile, but there's also a challenge to us to stop celebrating it. Celebrate the achievement. Don't celebrate an arbitrary ranking.
Absolutely.
All right. For me, what did I have? My predictions are a little closer to home, Matt.
Oh, okay.
My prediction is by the end of 2023, Matt Irving will be in a new job.
Oh, that's scary. Oh, thanks for that prediction. Ay.
Well, we'll have to wait and see if that one comes true.
I better start looking.
A bit of fun there, a bit of fun. All right, Matt. Before we wrap up, just a couple of things. I guess I just wanted to quickly talk about Edleaders for 2023, some goals and what we've got planned ahead. We had our company-wide retreat about a month ago. By company-wide, I mean the two of us.
The two of us. We had a company retreat.
We had a company retreat.
It happened.
It did. It was a great weekend.
Yeah, well, you made me think for like the whole time. We didn't stop talking. It was a very intense company retreat, I must say, but it was in a beautiful location, so that made all the difference.
It did. It did. So with that, goals for 2023, I've got two. One is the impact list, and we'll be talking about more about this, in the new year. Hopefully, publishing the impact list around March, April, but really highlighting those educators and those people connected to education that are having an impact in their communities and having an impact on education, possibly more broadly as well.
Fantastic! Can't wait to bring that to fruition, to really celebrate just the wonderful people and the wonderful things that they're doing across the country.
Absolutely. And the second is the mastermind. We had our initial mastermind group here in Perth, which met on a regular basis throughout the year. Really rewarding, really rich experience, and very excited that we're going to be kind of launching a couple of additional streams of that. One up in Brisbane with our friend Megan King, which is launching in January. And then in a couple of months' time, our very first online mastermind. So very excited to see how those things go. And then thirdly, we are bringing the Edleaders Plus community membership to the fore. And what will this look like? It'll be a $99 a year membership for our members, our people who have supported us along the way, who want to help us to continue to make great content. But there'll be some additional perks. There'll be an online community that goes with that, and some special access, Matt, to some special events that you and I will host, some Ask Me Anything, some office hours throughout the year to ring up and engage in a conversation. Ring up and join us, I should say, on a Zoom call for a conversation. Talking about challenges that people might be having in their own jobs and whatnot. And then also for members only podcasts from people from that community.
Wow, there's a lot going on. 2023, what's on our to learn list? How do we do all of this and continue to have an impact? But I'm really excited about all those different things that we've committed to, spreading the love and bringing more people into the Edleaders fold.
Absolutely, I can't wait to continue to grow the community and to kind of, I guess, deliver on that notion of authentic conversations and authentic connection, with people in K-12 education. And I think, the mastermind for me, I don't know, do you want to just describe a little bit in your words, a mastermind, and what you've seen as the benefit of the mastermind that we've been running here in Perth?
I think the wonderful thing about Mastermind is that you bring people from all walks of life, from all sectors, and we bring them together in community, and we foster deep, meaningful connections. And in many ways, that's what people value the most. It's not necessarily what we thought was going to be of value when we first started. A traditional mastermind is an opportunity to put down some challenges and to seek the input and feedback from your colleagues. And that's still an element of what we do in our mastermind, and still has its place, and still people value that opportunity to really explore their challenges, both what their personal career development looks like versus some of the challenges in their schools. But for me, the ability to build such deep relationships that then blossom outside the mastermind has been, a wonderful thing to witness. And I think, those three ideas are the things that I think make our masterminds work, and that's what we value.
Absolutely. Like, the value is actually being in the room, whether that's the literal room or the online room. The value is showing up, committing kind of getting to know other people. And, you know, like it's like having your own personal board of advisors that you can go to with, you know, your challenges of what's going on, you know, in your day-to-day or your professional life, but that value of deep, meaningful connection with colleagues who they understand what you're going through. They understand the position you're in. They, you know, they are educators who are, I guess, a bit like us. They're a bit like an outlier. They want to see change. They want to see things improve. They want to do things in a better way. They want to, you know, they want to extend themselves. They want to challenge themselves to be better leaders. And I think, you know, one of those notions of everybody wins if a leader is better. And how often do we, you know, do we really invest in our own leadership? Yes, we might go to a conference here and there, or we might go to a workshop, but does that really improve your leadership? But if you're surrounding yourself with, you know, talented people who are like-minded, you know, and who are going to challenge you to be a better leader, I think that's where true improvement happens. And, you know, and I think that's the unique aspect of a mastermind.
Yeah, I think reflecting on our Perth mastermind to see, you know, 7 of our 10 or 11 members now in new positions in the middle of, you know, towards the middle of the year and going to the end of our year. I think it's a really great reflection on people's personal journeys and development and how the mastermind has influenced their confidence, their capability in putting themselves forward. So that's been a great, you know, a great thing to witness.
Absolutely. So with that, Matt, any closing comments?
Any closing comments? Well, what a year it's been. I think we've just had such wonderful interviews, some great insights along the way. And for me, you know, if I was to just sort of sum it all up, you know, I have one word: community. You know, we are building a unique community. We're really thankful for the people that listen to the podcast. We're so thankful for the people that have joined us for our roundtables and our mastermind, the people that have endured, you know, us speaking at conferences and engaged with us in breakout sessions and the like. Truly thankful for our Edleaders community. So if there was one thing I would sum up our whole journey this year, would be community.
I love it. That's a great word for the year, I think, community. And I totally agree. I'm very thankful for everyone that listens to this podcast. I'm thankful for those people that send us emails or comments about the value that they get. It really gives us a lift when we get those kind of messages. And I'm thankful for those people that have just supported us on the journey, whether that's been sponsors, you know, collaborators, people having us at their live events. You know, very, very thankful for those connections and those people. So totally agree with you there. And with that ends our recap of 2022. We look forward to joining you again with more content, better content, and more of it in 2023. And remember, if you haven't already, please subscribe to the show and don't forget to share the love with a few of your colleagues that you listen to this great podcast called Edleaders. You can connect with both of us on LinkedIn and also connect with Edleaders on LinkedIn. You can join our tribe at edleaders.com.au, where we'll keep you up to date with all the latest, and hopefully we'll be getting out a few more newsletters in 2023. So watch this space. You can join up to our Edleaders Plus community membership on the Edleaders website as well. So to our entire audience, thanks again for listening in 2022. We'll catch you in 2023.
Go well.